The Federal Reserve says inflation is under control. The White House says the economy is booming. And Arby's just released an $18 sandwich. On the surface, everything looks fine. Consumer confidence is up. The unemployment rate is low. But here's the thing. The price of eggs has tripled since 2020. Your grocery bill is up 27%. And your rent didn't forget to go up either. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you that inflation isn't just bad luck. It's a tax. And it's the most powerful tax in existence because nobody voted for it. Because unlike income taxes, which require Congress to pass a bill, this one is invisible. It quietly makes your money worth less. Welcome to the hidden tax nobody talks about. Let's start with the basics. Inflation is the rate at which prices rise over time. When inflation is 5%, a basket of goods that cost $100 last year costs $105 this year. A little inflation, around 2%, is actually what central banks target. It encourages spending over hoarding and keeps the economy moving. But here's where it gets complicated. Who controls inflation? In America, that would be the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913. It controls the money supply and sets interest rates. And it answers to almost no one. The Fed has two main tools. It can raise or lower interest rates. And it can expand or contract the money supply directly. And it's that second tool, expanding the money supply, that's at the center of the hidden tax story. Here's how money creation works. The Fed doesn't literally print physical bills. It creates money digitally, out of thin air, by purchasing government bonds and crediting bank accounts. It sounds like magic, because it kind of is. And between 2020 and 2022, the Fed used that magic on a scale never seen before. The U.S. money supply expanded by over $6 trillion in just 2 years. To put that in perspective, it took the United States over 200 years to accumulate its first $6 trillion in money supply. The Fed doubled that in 24 months. And when you flood the economy with new dollars without a corresponding increase in goods and services, the math is simple. More dollars chasing the same stuff means each dollar is worth less. That's inflation, and that's the hidden tax. But here's what makes it a tax specifically. When the government creates new money, it gets to spend that money first, before prices adjust. And by the time that money filters down to you, prices have already gone up. So your existing dollars buy less than they did before. This concept has a name. It's called the Cantillon effect, named after 18th century economist Richard Cantillon. The idea is simple. The people who receive new money first, the government, the banks, large corporations, benefit the most because they get to spend at the old prices. By the time the money trickles down to wages and savings, prices have already risen. The last to receive new money are the first to feel the pain. And guess who's always last? The working and middle class. The people without assets. The Cantillon effect is one of the most important concepts in economics that nobody teaches in school, because it explains exactly who benefits and who pays when money is created. Translation: the hidden tax doesn't fall equally on everyone. It falls hardest on the people who can least afford it. Now let's look at who actually won when $6 trillion was created between 2020 and 2022. Asset owners won. Big. If you owned a house, its value went up 40% between 2020 and 2023. If you own stocks, the S&P 500 more than doubled from its 2020 low. Real estate, stocks, business equity, all of these inflated along with the money supply. When there are more dollars, real assets priced in those dollars go up. The wealthiest 10% of Americans own 89% of all stocks. So when the money printer runs, it's not evenly distributed. The top 10% got richer. The bottom 50% got a stimulus check and higher prices. And here's the number that tells the whole story. During the 2020 to 2021 money printing period, U.S. billionaire wealth increased by $1.3 trillion in 1 year. Now let's look at who lost. If you had $50,000 sitting in a savings account earning 0.01% interest during 2022, while inflation was running at 8.5%, your real purchasing power dropped by roughly $4,000 in a single year. You didn't spend a dollar. You didn't make a bad investment. You just sat there. And inflation came in and quietly took $4,000 worth of purchasing power from you. And you didn't even get a tax receipt. The average savings account interest rate in America today is 0.45%. The Fed's own inflation target is 2%. That means anyone sitting in a regular savings account is losing money in real terms every year. By design. That's not an accident. When interest rates are below inflation, it punishes savers and rewards borrowers. And the biggest borrower in the world is the U.S. government. Let's go to the grocery store. The average American grocery bill has increased 27% since 2020. And that's the average. Staples have gone up even more. Eggs. In 2020, a dozen eggs cost about $1.48. By early 2023, that number hit $4.82 nationally. In some states, over $7. Bread is up 25%. Chicken is up 28%. Butter is up 34%. Orange juice is up 67%. And the thing is, these aren't luxury items. These are the basics. The things every American buys every week. The hidden tax hits hardest right where it hurts most. Nobody voted for that. Nobody approved that tax. It just happened. Now let's go to the gas station. The average price of gas in 2020 was $2.17 per gallon. By June 2022, it hit an all-time national average of $5.01, a 130% increase in 2 years. For a family that drives 1,000 miles a month, that's an extra $150 to $200 a month just to get to work, get the kids to school, and buy those overpriced eggs. And rent. The national median rent increased 25% between 2021 and 2023. In Austin, Phoenix, and Miami, rents went up 40% to 50% in 2 years. For someone earning $50,000 a year, a $400 monthly rent increase is a 10% effective pay cut. Invisible, unlegislated, and entirely legal. So while your costs went up 27% at the grocery store, 130% at the gas pump, and 25% on your rent, how did your wages do? Nominal wages, the number on your paycheck, did go up. Between 2020 and 2023, average hourly wages rose about 15%. But inflation over that same period ran at roughly 20%, meaning real wages fell by about 5%. You got a raise, and somehow ended up poorer. That's the hidden tax at work. It doesn't show up on your W-2. It doesn't appear on your pay stub. It just quietly redistributes your purchasing power. And here's where it connects back to the government. The United States currently has $35 trillion in national debt. Inflation is actually good for debtors because it erodes the real value of what they owe. A debt of $1 trillion in 2020 dollars is worth significantly less in 2025 dollars. The U.S. government has every incentive to allow moderate to high inflation. It reduces the real burden of its enormous debt, and it raises more revenue through bracket creep. So while you're paying more for eggs and gas, the government is quietly watching its debt burden shrink in real terms. That's the hidden tax in its purest form. And nobody voted for any of this. Now let's talk about who inflation doesn't hurt. Because it's not everyone. If you own real assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, businesses, inflation generally increases their nominal value. Your net worth goes up even as the dollar weakens. That's why financial advisors tell wealthy clients to stay invested. Being in cash during high inflation is the worst place to be. The problem? You need money to buy assets. And for the 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, the inflation hedge isn't an option. This is what economists call the inflation divide. The asset-owning class gets richer. The wage-earning class gets poorer. And inflation is the mechanism that transfers wealth from one to the other. Let's look at the bottom 50% of earners since 2000. Wages up 85%. Cost of living up 120%. The bottom half of America is significantly worse off in real terms than 25 years ago. And the Federal Reserve has been managing this process the entire time. So what can you actually do about it? First rule, don't hold too much cash. Cash loses value during inflation. Money sitting in a checking account at 0% while inflation runs at 3% is a guaranteed loss. Second rule, high-yield savings accounts. They offer 4% to 5% today. Not glamorous, but it at least keeps pace with moderate inflation. There is no excuse for parking money at 0.01%. Third, I-bonds. Issued by the U.S. Treasury, I-bonds pay a rate tied directly to inflation. When inflation was 8%, I-bonds were paying 9.62%. limited to $10,000 per year per person. Fourth, tips. Treasury inflation-protected securities. Government bonds whose principal adjusts with the CPI. You can buy them directly through treasurydirect.gov. Fifth, index funds. The stock market, over long periods, has historically outpaced inflation by 4% to 5% annually. A low-cost index fund gives you real asset exposure. Sixth, real estate. Property values historically rise with inflation. If you can buy, owning is often better than renting during inflationary periods. But here's the uncomfortable truth about all of this advice. Every single one of these tools requires capital. You need money to protect your money. If you're in the bottom 40% of earners, living paycheck to paycheck, you can't buy I-bonds. You can't invest in index funds. You are completely exposed to the hidden tax with zero ability to hedge. That's not a personal finance failure. That's a structural feature of how inflation works. And that's what makes inflation the most powerful tax in existence. It's regressive. It hits the poor harder than the rich. It's invisible. It requires no legislation. Now let's zoom out and look at the historical picture. The dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. 97%. A dollar in 1913 had the same purchasing power as roughly $30 today. The Fed's entire century of existence has been a century of slow, steady, managed inflation. Between 1913 and 1970, the dollar lost about 75% of its value over 57 years. Between 1970 and today, it lost another 85% in just 54 years. The pace is accelerating. The reason? In 1971, President Nixon ended the gold standard. Before that, every dollar was theoretically backed by physical gold. After that, backed by nothing but faith. Which means the money printer had no natural limits anymore. And it hasn't stopped since. Let's look at what happened in extreme cases. Argentina experienced 211% inflation in 2023. Their currency has lost nearly all its value in a generation. The Weimar Republic in 1920s Germany printed so much money that prices doubled every few days. People literally wheeled wheelbarrows of cash to the grocery store. Now, America is not Argentina or Weimar Germany, but the mechanism is the same. The only difference is the speed and the scale. And here's the sobering question. If the dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power in 110 years, what does the next 110 years look like? Let's bring it back to 2025. The Fed raised rates from near zero to 5.25% between March 2022 and July 2023, the highest in 22 years. And it worked, temporarily. Inflation came down from its 9.1% peak in June 2022 to around 3% by mid-2024. The Fed declared victory and started cutting rates. But here's the thing about winning the inflation fight. The prices don't go back down. The eggs that cost $6 don't go back to $2. They just stop rising as fast. The damage is permanent. The purchasing power you lost during the 2021 to 2023 inflation surge isn't coming back. And the debt that drove the money printing? Still there. $35 trillion and growing. Which means the incentive to inflate again is still there too. So where does this leave the average American? It leaves them in a world where cash is a melting ice cube, where the rules are set by institutions most people have never heard of. The Federal Reserve, the Treasury, the Congressional Budget Office. These are the entities that determine the value of every dollar you earn, save, and spend. And most Americans have no idea how any of it works. That's by design. The hidden tax works best when nobody knows it exists. Because here's the dirty secret. If inflation were called what it actually is, a tax on your savings, a transfer of wealth from workers to debtors, people would riot. Instead, it's called monetary policy. It's discussed in academic papers with words like quantitative easing and money supply normalization. And while economists argue about basis points, your grocery bill goes up another 3%. So here's the summary. The Fed created $6 trillion in new money between 2020 and 2022. That money flowed to the government first, then to banks, then to corporations, then to asset owners. By the time it reached the average worker in the form of wages, prices had already adjusted. The real cost was paid in purchasing power, silently, without consent. Asset owners got richer. Savers got poorer. The government's debt got cheaper in real terms. And nobody sent you a bill. That's the hidden tax. And it's running right now. The CPI is already back above the Fed's 2% target. The money supply is still elevated. And Washington has shown no appetite for the kind of spending cuts that would reduce future money creation. So the hidden tax isn't going away. It's just changing speed. What can you do? High-yield savings, I-bonds, index funds, real assets, anything that isn't cash sitting in a checking account earning nothing. But more importantly, understand what's happening. Because the hidden tax is most powerful when you don't know it exists. Know that every dollar you hold is slowly worth less. Know that the system rewards borrowers and punishes savers. Know that the people creating money get to spend it before prices adjust. And know that the government calling it inflation instead of a tax doesn't change what it actually is. So yeah, the economy looks fine on the surface. The stock market is up. Unemployment is low. Consumer spending is strong. But your grocery bill is 27% higher. Your rent is 25% higher. Your gas is still 50% higher than it was 4 years ago. And the dollar in your wallet is worth less than it was yesterday, and less than it will be worth tomorrow. Not because of bad luck, not because of supply chains, because someone, somewhere, decided to create more dollars. And the cost of that decision was paid by you. Without your vote, without your consent, without even a line on your tax return. That's the hidden tax nobody talks about. And it's been running since 1913.